What's going on, everybody? I'm Tank, and this is the very first episode ever of Ask a Roadie. And this is a brand new series on my channel where I'm going to be answering questions that you guys ask about what it's like being a roadie on tour, what goes on backstage, anything else that you guys want to know. All you have to do, drop a comment, ask a question, and in future videos, I will answer those questions. Since this is the first episode, I'm going to be answering a lot of questions that were asked repeatedly or many times, and things that I feel that would be a good intro into the world that I live on the road. So let's just jump right into it. First question. Did you play in a band before you were a roadie? Short answer, yes. I was in multiple bands. But the most notable of those was a band from Chicago called Inept. We were like pop rock, pop punk, screamo elements to it. And I was the bass player for that band. And later on, I actually played drums for a couple shows too. But that band gave me my first taste of the road. And from there was no turning back. From 2007 to about mid-2009, we were on the road nonstop. Just 5 of us in a van and trailer, touring all over North America, playing anywhere and for anyone we could. I'm talking 5 people at a time sometimes. And eventually we got to a point where we got on some great tours and we made some great friends, times that I wouldn't trade for anything. And that is what eventually led me into becoming a roadie. Why and or how did you become a roadie? So becoming a roadie was nothing that I planned on. I never one day was like, you know what? I'm going to go work for bands. Anyone in a band, their dream is to make it. And we wanted to make it. But I got real tired of the struggle after a while. There were times where the most money I had in my bank account at a time was like $50. Like I'd have to borrow money from my other band members just to eat the dollar menu at McDonald's some night because you're spending a lot of money trying to stay afloat on the road, and being an unsigned band gets rough. So the short story is that one of the bands we were on tour with at the time, a band called Red that's from Nashville, I had kind of vented to their guitar player about how I was stressed and frustrated. And he kind of just brought up like, hey man, we're doing a big tour in the fall and we have the budget to bring out another guy, and we're not trying to steal you away from your band, but if you want a spot, we'll take you out. And I ended up doing it. I quit my band. It was really emotional and it was a really, really weird situation, but I quit my band. I jumped on tour with Red, and that was my first introduction to being a roadie, and then it just kept going from there. Next question. What band do you currently tour with? And I knew these questions were going to come up, and there's no use hiding anything. I'm not trying to hide it. So currently, I tour with a country artist from Nashville named Dustin Lynch. I am his guitar tech as well as the guitar tech for our stage left guitar player, Chris LaCourte. At times, I've been the guitar tech for everybody else on the stage manager as well, but as things have grown, I am just now Dustin and Chris's tech, and I've been on this gig for almost 5 years now. Next question. What bands have you toured with in the past? So this is going to be a long answer, but for the sake of this question, I'm going to keep it specifically related to bands that I have personally worked for, not including the tours that we were a part of, because that would be longer. This is just bands that I have worked for, that I have the tour pass to prove that I worked for them. And I think this list might surprise you because there's a lot of metal reactions on this channel. I have not worked for many metal bands, if any. And keep in mind, I haven't always been a guitar tech. I've done everything from merch, stage management, lighting, production assistant, tour manager, drum tech, bass tech, guitar tech. I'm not going to list all that. I'm just going with bands. So starting at the longest ago until now, I might miss some, but I'm going to try not to. Started with Red for King and Country, Toby Mac, Nickelback, Van Halen, Journey, Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo, Walk Off the Earth, Sick Puppies, Parmalee, Nick Jonas, Lifehouse, Foo Fighters, Faith No More, and currently with Dustin Lynch. There's probably some I forgot. I'm sorry. We can come back to this if I realize I did. But next question. Do you ever get asked to go on the road with different bands or groups at the same time and end up having to pick one over the other? Yes, that has happened a couple times in my career. One of them was when I was with Sick Puppies. They took a tour break and I went out with Walk Off the Earth to fill some time. Well, Sick Puppies was going back on the road, and there's a lot of stuff that kind of happened off the road that I'm not going to bring up, but I enjoyed my time with Walk Off the Earth so much that I decided I was not going back to work for the Sick Puppies, and I stayed with Walk Off the Earth. And the other time was when I just started with Dustin Lynch 5 years ago. I had an offer for him and another country artist named Frankie Ballard at the same time, and wasn't really too familiar with each of them. So I just made a lot of calls around town and asked friends who they thought would be a better bet to go with. And I went with Dustin, and I've been here for 5 years, so it all worked out. Next question. Who would be the ultimate dream musician that you would like to tech for? Devin Townsend, without a doubt, hands down. I love that guy's musicianship. I love everything about his sense of humor. Anything he's ever been a part of, I love it. And he's so good at the guitar that I would love to learn more from him. So Devin, I'll go out with you if you ever need it. Next question. As a roadie, do you have to know all the band's songs? Interesting and great question, and the answer is no. There are a lot of tours that I have done where I didn't know any of the band's music when I started. A good example of that is my current employer, Dustin Lynch. I was not familiar with his music, and the first show that I ever did with him, I had to have our tour manager stand next to me and kind of guide me through all the guitar changes because I didn't know what was coming next. And another situation that just happened recently, there's another country artist named Jimmy Allen who we did a festival with that asked me if I would guitar tech for him in his set. I said yes, and I only knew like 2 or 3 of his songs since he was still a new artist at the time, and I had to just sit there and really focus on the set list and make sure I knew where we were to know when songs were going to end. So no, you don't need to know the music of the band you're about to work for, but it certainly helps. Next question. How long are you normally on tour and away from home? It kind of depends on what genre of music you're working because everybody does it a little different. But on a lot of the rock and classic rock tours I did, we'd be out from anywhere to 2 to 5 months at a time without going back home. Just solid on the road, on the buses, staying at hotels all the time. And an interesting scenario that happened was I got married 6 years ago. I got home from a tour 4 days before I got married and then left 3 days after. The schedule's that demanding. You just got to go. But now with country, it's totally different. We only do shows on the weekends for the most part. So we leave every Wednesday night on the buses, shows on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then we're home every Sunday. And that's great because having a wife and dogs and a house, I get to come home and see my family every week, and that's awesome. It's not always exactly that way. Like if we go overseas, we're going to be out for weeks to months, but for the most part, it's only weekends right now in country. Next question. What are some of your favorite places you've ever visited? Man, that is a hard question because I've traveled a lot of the world and I try and find something that I like about every place we've been in, but one of my favorite cities in the world is Toronto. I love Toronto. I would live there if I could. I don't know if I'd like the winters at this point, but the first time I ever went to Ireland and Scotland was amazing for me because a lot of my family is originally from that part of the world, so it was very cool being there for the first time. Germany, man, I've had some crazy times over there. We can get into those stories another day, but Germany's always a blast. Australia, New Zealand, Auckland, another one of my favorite cities. I was actually in Auckland the last time that the All Blacks won the Rugby World Cup, and it was insane. And we also got to go to Hobbiton, the Lord of the Rings set, and that was awesome. Man, hard question. I'm sure there's other places I could think of, but for now, next question. Do you always work for one band, or is there a company who provides roadies? Interesting question, because yes, you can always work for one band. But there are also companies who provide their own roadies for tours. So if you work in what we call the core crew for a band, that's usually tour management, production management, techs, sound engineer, lighting director, stuff like that. You work for that specific band. You get paid by them, so you are employed by them. On the flip side, there are a lot of companies in the music industry that we call vendors that provide sound for tours, lighting, trucking, a lot of other stuff. They specifically take their employees and place them on those tours if that tour needs people out there to maintain and operate that gear. So perfect example, when I worked for a merch company, that company would call me and say, hey, we have this tour available and they need a merch guy on it. Would you like to work it? You can say yes or no, but why would you say no to work? So yes, you can work for one band at a time, but there are also companies that will send their own employees out to be roadies on other tours. Next question. Do you enjoy any other genres of music other than rock and metal? Yes, I do. I really do. But I will say, rock and metal is absolutely my go-to. It's always been my favorite. I think it probably always will be. I'm actually the guy on our tour that when I'm working on guitars all day, I'm obnoxiously blasting metal music in my work box, and I've kind of become known for that in the country world. But I was raised by my dad on classic rock and blues, stuff like the Rolling Stones, Deep Purple. My parents named me Ian after Ian Gillan. Stevie Ray Vaughan, Led Zeppelin, John Prine, Muddy Waters. This list could go on and on, but man, that is just timeless, nostalgic music for me, and I still love it. Surprisingly for you guys probably, I like hip hop and rap too. Mostly late 80s, early 90s. A lot of East Coast, West Coast. Nas was one of my favorites. I still think Illmatic is one of the best hip hop records ever. NWA, Snoop Dogg, Eazy-E. I like a lot of newer stuff like Kendrick Lamar too. Speaking of Eazy-E, I was in such an Eazy-E fix when I first met my wife that we were listening to his first record in my car. And I was like, if you could name me this song and artist right now, I will marry you. She couldn't do it, but I still married her. So guys, that is it for the very first episode of Ask a Roadie. I hope some of the things that I said were informative, funny, you enjoyed it. And if there's anything else you want to know, drop a comment below. I want to keep doing more of these and just answering your questions. This is a blast. I actually didn't even get through half the questions that were asked in my last video, and I have another stack here ready to go for another episode. So I can't wait to get to these. Feel free to ask more questions. I absolutely love this. I'm Tank. I'm going to bring you another episode of Ask a Roadie very soon.